The Houston Cougars absolutely dominate Central Florida, beating them at their own game 79-55.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the postgame, first listen the next morning, first listen anywhere in between. Appreciate you listening each and every day. If you want to join the conversation and you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. Okay, I was wrong in this game. This game will be a little bit closer than it was. Tell us about a time in a PG kind of way that you were wrong, because I thought this game would be close and it was not. Houston wins 79-55 over Central Florida. I want to get into how this game turned into a blowout, the growing up of the freshmen, comparing this team at this point to last year as best we can. I guess there's that whole BYU team coming to play next, and we should probably talk some about them as well. Now, I also have some intention on getting some stuff out on the football side of things in the morning for you. So all those kinds of things will be a lot of fun. Today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time. If you're trying to get into one of these games, get into a Rockets game, get into any kind of a game, event, show, whatever, Game Time's best place to get in on that action. Speaking of action, Houston, 79 big ones. I would point out 79 points is particularly impressive when you shoot 16% from three. This was not a game where Houston was just like hot out the gates, running with offense. Nothing would go wrong. Houston went a couple stretches the first half without scoring. Houston didn't make their first three-point basket until about 10 minutes left in the second half. Houston just got to the paint at will, dominated the points in the paint in this one, 42-14. You heard that correctly. Houston beat UCF in points in the paint, 42-14. Now, every dayers know, but if you haven't been following along, the big surprise there is UCF is one of the tallest teams in college basketball, like one of the biggest in terms of average height per player. And it didn't matter at all in this one. Houston absolutely dominated. Did shoot 55% from the field overall in this one. Again, I would point out some of those stretches of the first half where they did not score a basket for minutes at a time, and it didn't seem to matter. I also think that the Houston's defense is the thing that always carries them in these moments. They were up 51-31 at one point in the middle of the second half. This game was a 10-point game early in the second half, and it exploded after the defensive effort turned into, I guess the defensive effort kind of stayed even keel, but the offense that came out of that eventually exploded, and it was just a matter of time. Houston had 7 steals. UCF had just 10 assists. Neither team got going in the fast break. That clearly favored Houston in a way that I would have thought favored the bigger team. UCF had 3 guys shooting 40% from 3 on the season. They shot 29% from 3 as a team. Now, again, I mentioned Houston did not shoot well from three-point line in this game on their own right. But when you're dominating like that in the paint, which UCF could not do, credit to Tugler, credit to Cenac, credit to Sacco, then it doesn't really matter if you're not shooting well from threes. Houston was able to dominate inside and make up for those things. All kinds of big kinds of efforts in this game, all kinds of big kinds of moments on defense. Kingston Flemings forcing the ball out of bounds on the perimeter and getting excited, even though Houston was up over 20 at that point. It might have been closer to 30. And just the will to dominate this game, I think, was evident from the get-go of the second half for sure. But like the physicality, like we're going to meet you blow for blow, was pretty impressive throughout this contest. Look, Houston got over 7 points from 7 different players. And look, I know that 7 times 7 is just 49. They had 79. It ends up feeling like more than that. But what that really means to me is UCF couldn't figure out where it was going to be coming from. It was Kingston and Cenac in the first half. Milos got loose in the second half. You kind of sprinkle in some JoJo Tugler. We had 3 baskets in a row there at one point. Khalifa Sacco had his own 7 points. Oh, and then Mercy Miller, the hot hand off the bench. All of these things tended to kind of flow together. Central Florida had no answers. And This is a Central Florida team that has wins over Kansas, has wins over Texas Tech, played Arizona to a 7-point game, wins over A&M, who's atop the SEC. This is a UCF team with impressive wins against good basketball teams. And Houston saw the resume, was not surprised, not taken aback, not trapped with a big BYU trip coming up this weekend, and never let this thing feel in doubt. Even in those stretches where it was a couple point game and Houston was going minutes without scoring, it really just felt like, okay, but like law of averages, regression to mean kind of stuff, they'll end up making shots before this one is over. I love being wrong in this way. I thought this would be a 14, 15, maybe even 17-point game that might have been like more like 10 or 12. You have fouls and free throws, and it gets to be 16. This thing wasn't 16 after the 5 minutes into the second half mark. This thing was blowing up, blowing up. Now, people are commenting in here a little bit too. Mr. Big Texco points out it was a beatdown, just like the old times team is starting to click and getting better. I want to kind of come back to that clicking and getting better part in a later portion of the episode here. Very surprised. RSVP says very surprised that the refs allowed Houston to play defense in the second half. I think UCF was surprised too. LOL. I would point out I think UCF did not know what was coming. The blitzes, the tagging the rollers, the nowhere to run, nowhere to go. Houston was everywhere, and I don't think they figured it out. Chris Mitchell here points out that it took a little longer for the Cougs to run away with than I predicted, but surely came utter dominance in a major way, both into the floor. Great game for us to have leading into, I think that's supposed to say Provo. Now, I see a lot of a lot of comments about this weekend in Provo, and I said throughout the week to Mike, I was wrong on some things. Other programs, other teams, uh, other places might have those problems where you're looking forward to the weekend. I don't ever feel that way about a Sampson squad. I don't ever feel like Houston and them will ever be looking past a conference opponent, especially a chance to show up in a home game with a great home atmosphere. The fans were rowdy. It was a good time. And I think that those things obviously will always help Houston. I think having Sampson as a guy that does not let his teams look past those things will be, continue to be a saving grace kind of moment for Houston in a gauntlet of a Big 12 conference, especially with that stretch we talk about in February. You and I can look forward and see how crazy that's going to be. He won't let them. Now, we got German Cougs here, Houston Cougars, Germany. Welcome into the show, Germany. Now, I think that one guy I want to point, I said I was wrong, and I will say I was wrong about. I thought this game would be more like in the teens, but one guy who was loud wrong here on a comment from yesterday's show that I blocked out the name. I don't mean to go after him, but I thought it was interesting and funny sentiment in hindsight. Point out that Houston, for all its NIL oil money, well, that's when you know this guy's first wrong, but for all its NIL oil money, doesn't have their best team this year. Disgrace and resigned to Indiana. Dawkins had designed a Houston beater squad entirely from the portal, so it mirrors Houston. Dominant, muscular, forward, rookie center, great guards and bench, best shooting, including threes ever, most assists and offensive board, defensive focus that denies threes, tallest, strongest. They have magical chemistry, are super experienced, and yet very coachable, blue collar, chip on their shoulder and selfless. They execute Dawkins' defensive switches that so frustrated Kansas, out of balance plays, lineup changes that can hold leads, come back late because they love pressure. They certainly didn't seem to like ball pressure on Wednesday night. Houston made sure all of that was just not the case. And I think that really speaks to it's easy to watch Houston from afar, to box score watch, look at clips on the internet, and just kind of think you kind of get it. But until you see it happen, until you're playing it in person, until you're like watching it live, it's hard to really grasp what Houston does to a team. Again, that guy is absolutely right on a number of things. This is a gigantic UCF team. This is a team that shoots the ball very well from behind the arc. It's a team that has a great assist to turnover ratio typically. In this game, they had 18 assists and 5 turnovers. Sorry, that's Houston. That's funny because UCF had 10 assists and 11 turnovers. UCF shot the ball 29% from behind the arc, and UCF got out rebounded 40-29. It's like the formula they put together got done to them, except that Houston didn't actually the ball from that well from behind the arc, and they still found a way to take the top off of this game. Now, I can't wait to talk more about these freshmen and those performances that they had in just 1 second. But first,
I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. Number 1 ranked UConn dominated Tennessee 96-66, turning a halftime tie into a historic win and avenging last season's loss by delivering the largest margin in the rivalry's history. AZ Fudd had 27 points and Sarah Strong added 26 as the Huskies remain perfect on the season, reminding everyone why they are the reigning national champions. In the Big Ten, number 2 UCLA rolled past number 8 Iowa 88-65, powered by 22 points from Angela Dukeledge and a huge advantage in the paint, staking their claim as a national threat. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Parker Ainsworth, Locked on Cougs here. And thank you for making Locked on Cougs your first listen to the postgame, first listen the next morning, or first listen anywhere in between. Appreciate you making sure to listen each and every day. And if you just want more Houston Cougars, more Locked on Cougs, you can't get enough. I know that we're kind of building as a program. You're seeing more and more coverage of Houston every week, it feels like. But if you want more from Locked on Cougs, I got to recommend the Locked on Every Dayer program. Look, ad-free audio, members-only Discord server, texting me throughout the game or throughout the week if you need to talk Houston Cougars a little bit extra. There's some bonus all-access content for those members as well. It's a great way to just get a little bit more. If you want to learn more of the program, lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. If you want to just get on the Cougs right away, and you've heard enough, go to lockedоncougs.supercast.com to sign up. Now, Houston dominated this game. It was an impressive performance. Again, I thought this game was going to be in the teens. This game ended up being double that for stretches of the second half. Houston finishes the game winning 79-55, 24-point win for Sampson and the Cougars to get their 20th win of the season. 20-2 is a pretty nifty start, I'll say, to be polite, to be kind, to start the year. Right now, Houston was led in the first half by a pair of freshmen. And freshmen, I would point out, that are looking less and less like freshmen. Kingston Flemings dominated both sides of the floor in the first half, dictated the pace, and while Houston did not have consistent offensive scoring throughout the first half, they did feel like have consistent offensive execution in the first half. Now, obviously, Kingston himself does not commit a whole lot of turnovers, but being the point guard for an offense that only has 5 turnovers on the night, I think speaks to the command Houston had in this game. And Kingston Flemings, as the point guard, deserves a lot of credit for that one. He himself just had one of those 5 turnovers. He played 31 minutes with the ball in his hands for the vast majority of that time. We keep talking about this guy, though, big fella Chris Cenac, the double he had tonight, 14 points, 10 rebounds. He had 10 points the first half. Another big half out of him. For whatever reason, we seem to have a big half out of him 3 games in a row now since that Texas Tech loss where he got kind of challenged. If you don't remember, don't recall, new to the show, that game he played very poorly against Texas Tech, got beat up by JT Toppin, and the following 48 hours, he heard it in the film room, but he also heard it in the media availability. People were like putting some of the JT Toppin offense against Chris Senac's defense and saying this is partially whatever. Since then, the guy's been on a tear. 14 points, 10 rebounds. And for all of the things Chris does that makes him a lottery pick in the next NBA draft, he's known as a stretch the floor pick and pop kind of big. He had a double-double tonight and had really great looks from behind the arc, but was 0 of 4. And on all other field goals, he was 7 of 9, but 0 of 4 from behind the arc and still managed to be a dominant force. I appreciated, frankly, the way in which he was able to be a great level of physical with the gigantic size that UCF had on the other end when Chris was playing defense. But Cenac would do that without fouling, had just 2 fouls in 29 minutes. And frankly, Sacco played really well for his 23 minutes. Sacco had 4 fouls. That's the right. It's your bench big. He can kind of be a little more flippant with his physicality, right? We should also praise JoJo Tugler for only getting his 2 fouls. We give him a hard time when he doesn't. He a little bit different minute distribution, but man, he came in and had a few quick buckets there in the second half, and it was his turn to rock. These freshmen, though, are just feeling less and less like freshmen. Isaiah Harwell had the second most minutes on the bench while we're speaking on freshmen. He had just 2 points. Harwell has continued to be an impressive guy in all of those, you know, unquantifiable kind of ways, dive on the floor for loose balls, cutting the ball off in dribble penetration, beating the pass on rotations. He's in the right spot, doing the right things in a way that's hard to quantify, but jumps off the screen when you watch this team. And it was on full display in his 18 minutes on Wednesday night. And I guess Chase McCarty's not technically a freshman. He's a redshirt freshman, which is like he'd been around the program for another year, but hadn't played much more than a freshman. He only played 2 minutes. He got one shot up, right? Whatever. I think it's mostly just encouraging that after the big time injury Chase had against TCU a couple weeks, or was it just 10 days ago? Recently, that he was able to get back out there, and had this game been more in doubt, you might have seen him more. But honestly, with the game going the way it did, you didn't need to. I think that played more of a role in his impact than anything. Now, I'm going on about the young guys, and nobody's a freshman after 24 games. No one's a freshman in February. I hear all of that. I think that's comments that we hear a lot from Sampson himself. I think that's really more a function, though, of this program doesn't allow you to be. There are plenty of freshmen across college basketball that are going to be lottery picks. It's a crazy freshman class nationally, but B, that are making freshman mistakes left and right in their programs. This program's development system is unmatched, unparalleled. Look at last year's team between January 1st and February 27th or 28th, whatever, right? Look at this year's team just between January 1st and now. The leaps, the strides, the ways that the guys improve is truly second to none. And you see those big jumps happen in freshmen often because they have so much more room to grow. This team, this program gets those guys to that point so quick, so quickly, so like it's not like fluky. It's very much of an established kind of growth. And I think that's easy for us to get accustomed to it. Like we see it happen every year. It was, maybe Milos, who was not a freshman last year, was new to the program. We expected him to be caught up, and he did eventually catch up, right? It was Cryer the year before, and I guess also to some degree Tugler as a freshman the year before. And you're seeing these guys continue to Arsenault and Emmanuel Sharp, Jarris Walker, that freshman class, right, had the same kind of a thing where Jarris wasn't allowed to be a freshman after about mid-December. This is the kinds of growth we're accustomed to seeing in a Kelvin Sampson program. I don't mean to say there's anything to not expect. It's very much the kind of thing that you would expect from a Kelvin Sampson program. I do think, though, that this is a special part of this program, and it's great to see it happen over and over and over again. People having fun with UCF and the Space City thing. Texas Observer here says that we are Space City. Also points out that UCF is, that's John, sorry, John Ruggier Ruggieri says that UCF's lucky we missed so many threes. Would have been a worse beatdown. Had Houston shot their normal, like let's just say the shot 33% from three, you add in what would that be, another 12 points. You're looking closer to a 40-point win potentially for Houston if they shoot well from behind the arc. Now, things change. It wouldn't be an exactly tit for tat kind of deal, but man, oh man. Now, this is a 30-minute show. Okay, we got more content coming out tomorrow, so I don't feel so bad. But I do want in the last segment talk about comparing this point in the year to last year at about this point. I'm kind of feeling like we're actually ahead of that 8 ball, but still have a lot of room to go. BYU this weekend, if we get there, so much more to break down on Houston and UCF and where the basketball program is at presently. But before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time, because if you try to get into the action, get into one of these Houston Cougar basketball games, or get into any event going on these days, Game Time, that's best place to get into it. There's nothing like an NBA arena, crowd, energy moment. Getting tickets, though, that can be kind of challenging. That's why Game Time's become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast. The hassle, it puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans. Now, all in pricing up front means there's aren't no surprises. You'll never see anything that you didn't see coming in the first place. Like great last minute options too. NBA tickets show up at solid prices. Sometimes they even go down as the tip off gets closer. Quick, intuitive, stress free from start to finish. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account, use code locked on for $20 off your first purchase. That's locked on, LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not gametime.com. Park Rangers locked on Cougs here. And also want to remind you guys that as we're in February and we're talking about like recruiting on the football side or the basketball and McDonald's All Americans and adding to the Houston Cougars, you can add to your team as well. But hiring is not just about finding someone who's willing to take the job. It's certainly not the Cougs do. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who can match what you're looking for, Indeed sponsored jobs are the move. Now, because instead of hoping for the right person stumbles across your posts, Indeed can help you find and match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, skills, certifications, location, etc. Now, if I were hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who can help me. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in and make an impact on day one, like a Kingston Flemings kind of freshman. Come in and start day one. With sponsored jobs, your post can be seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And then stat that says it all in a minute, in the single minute that I've been talking to you about Indeed, companies like you have made 27 hires using Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Parker Ainsworth locked on Cougs here. And I want to talk to you guys some about this team and kind of where we're feeling at this point compared to last year. And I feel like, honestly, and John points out here, like we feel lucky to have Sampson because the way these guys develop and the same things be happening every single year. But as we look at where we're at presently, right? I think that last year Houston lost to Tech to open February at home, 1 point overtime. Everyone remembers the chaos, blue jerseys, yada yada yada. I'm not going to rehash old stuff. This year, Houston lost to Tech at the end of January up in Lubbock, a little bit different, also by 4 points. Didn't have to go to overtime, whatever, right? Last year, following that Tech game, there was like a residual few games of lull where you were kind of still finding yourself offensively. It felt like they were kind of changing up some things they were doing, handing parts of the offense over to Milos or parts of this over there and getting LJ Cryer in more isolation spots. And that growth kind of led to some uglier basketball games and maybe some, a 10-point win when it could have been a 20-point win or a 15-point win when it could have been a 30-point win. This year, this team, since that Tech loss, looks like a team motivated, invigorated, out to prove that was the one-off, that was the difference game, not the that was the one that sticks out as the sore thumb. And they are handling business in a way, while I would argue still getting better, that last year's team seemed to be growing through. And look, I completely understand how there's both teams, last year's team at the start of February and this year's team at the start of February, have so far to go to be playing on a Monday in April. And last year's team got there, right? Like this is not to say that Houston is like already better than they were a year ago. I do think they're better on February 4th, 2026 than they were on February 4th, 2025. And I may get into this more. Let's get into the weekend at BYU and stuff like that. But I think that the difference will be, and I've kind of been hanging on this a couple times throughout the season, the growth of last year's team between like February 4th and March 4th or February 4th and April 4th was incredible. This team's got the ability to do that, starts at a great place to do that. We saw like sparks of that tonight against Central Florida. It's really going to be about, can you continue to make those leaps and strides? I think there's tons of reasons to be optimistic and think that. You start 2 freshmen, you play, if you count redshirt freshmen, 2 more in your rotation. You'd think those guys get a lot better. For what it's worth, I think this team also showed that the floor of this team can be lower than last year's team. Last year's floor was still super high, and I mean that may actually be the bigger piece of it. We'll see. February this season is a challenging month in a way that last year, look, it just wasn't quite the same conference last year. I still think the Big 12 was a little underrated last year. This year, you have to play Arizona, Kansas, and Iowa State, all 3 of them in the course of about 9 days. You play BYU this weekend, who has a guy that might be the number 1 pick. Kansas has the one if he's not. Let's keep those things going. Now, here's what I will say, and I don't mean to predict undefeated things. I'm trying to go one day at a time like everyone else, and I know that's exactly what Sampson and the program are doing. But as you continue to stack up these wins, you're actually in control of your own destiny in this Big 12 conference, because everyone's taking a lump here or there. You took yours against Texas Tech a little over 10 days ago, whatever that was, right? With the one game matchup with Arizona, if you continue to stack wins and take care of business, you can have a similar record, the same record, and win the tiebreaker there, right? Same with, Iowa State's got a couple losses, but if you hand them a third, then you kind of give yourself some wiggle room with them. And same with Kansas and Tech, you split with and actually split points with as well. Both won at home. That feels even. And Tech has taken losses, including to the Central Florida Knights that you just blew out. I think that this is shaping up to actually be an incredible finish. And the Big 12 Conference is so much fun. But there's a weird world here where Houston still, even with 2 regular season losses, only one of which is in the Big 12, is very much in control of their destiny. And that's, we think about Arizona's being talked about. Talk about tonight on the telecast. If you were there in person, you obviously didn't see the telecast. But Arizona's got the most wins start season in school history, 22-0 or something stupid, right? Sure, great. Uh, to be in the driver's seat still, right? That's pretty crazy, especially when it feels like the team that wins the Big 12 will almost certainly be a 1 seed in March Madness. Why does it matter for Houston? I think John's already hit it here, so I'll find the comment. The South Regional runs through Houston, I'll remind you. And if you can be the 1 or 2 seed in that one, where they kind of place you regionally, Houston is able to play in that because they did not play in the Toyota Center for more than 3 games this season. I don't think they played 3 games even. And you'll also, for what it's worth, Houston has intentionally just redistributed who's in charge of hosting at that regional. Houston can control their own destiny in the Big 12. They continue winning games. One of the Big 12 will likely be a 1 seed. You can be setting up, getting to play the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games at the Toyota Center in Houston with a trip to Final Four on the line. That'd be 3rd Final Four since the pandemic. That'd be crazy. I mean, get ahead of ourselves. I think you and I are allowed to get ahead of ourselves, where Sampson and company are not, because they've got to coach through the games. You and I get to talk Cougs, so we can talk about whatever we're going to talk about. I think that's a crazy possible outcome to this season, especially given how young this team is. Now, obviously, there's a lot of ball to get through. And we talked some about this game tonight, and I don't mean to just be pushing it on the rug. We've got a gigantic game Saturday to kind of keep stacking these up. I think Houston can go steal one on the road in a way that people might not be expecting them to, but you and I are smarter than that. We'll be talking about that this week. We got some football things come out. PFF put Houston as one of the best transport classes in the country. We got to go show them some love and talk about what that looks like as well. We got great home court advantage. Got people showing up and talking about how great that was. We've got big time games in mid-February. Obviously, football recruiting 2027 is already started. They're getting off signing committing guys. Basketball commits are rolling. We talked a lot in the fall about how guys might start committing again in February and March. Now we're into February and getting into March. All these things are stacking up. There's just so much Houston Cougar news each and every day, and I can't wait to talk about it with you. Now, hit subscribe. We are the most listened to Houston Cougar podcast out there. But I would point out, like, I'd like to continue to grow this thing. I look at the Big 12 charts, look at the Locked On charts, just keep on growing. Subscribe, hit the bell so you know when things go live. Houston blows out UCF, much to my dismay, much to this commenter's dismay, 79-55. Houston is Space City. UCF heads home. Locked On Cougs, the primarily Locked On podcast network. And that means your team, the Houston Cougars, every day. Go Cougs.